Hey guys, in this video we are analyzing price ceilings, a type of price control. It's a situation where the government has set a price maximum. Now, I want to give you some context right from the beginning. In the videos that we shoot here at Econ Busters, we are focused a lot on markets. Microeconomics is focused a lot on markets, and the reason is because we have a market-based economy, okay? The way that we are deciding how to allocate resources, generally speaking, has to do with markets and the prices that come out of markets and the idea that prices coordinate economic action. Now, here is the situation. Market-based economies have many positives. There's no doubt about it. Market-based economies do have a lot of positives. They have proven to bring higher standards of living for the people of that country in general, okay? Now, there's sometimes exceptions, which gets to some of the downsides of market-based economies. And one of the downsides is income inequality. Sometimes we get a degree of income inequality that we think is too much. And here is the situation. When we have high degrees of income inequality, and we understand in a market-based economy that demand is based not only on willingness to purchase something, but also the ability to buy it, we then oftentimes are tempted with needs because of that income inequality, and that demand is based on not just willingness, but ability to control the price, okay? And that's what we are doing with this price ceiling. We're controlling the price. We're setting, again, a price maximum. Now, again, this little PC, that C stands for price ceiling. You're going to generally see price ceilings drawn below price equilibrium or price market because they are going to bind the market, okay? This is called a binding price ceiling. A price ceiling up here wouldn't do anything to the market, all right? The price that would prevail if a price ceiling was set here would be this price equilibrium, this price market, because again, it's a price maximum. The price can go up and down underneath the price ceiling, okay? So it is flexible underneath the price ceiling, but it's setting a maximum. You can see why it's called a ceiling, right? It can't go above. It's setting a top to the price. Again, a price maximum. And again, we see this done in market-based economies for needs because of the income inequality that might exist and the fact, again, that demand is based on willingness and ability to pay. But I want you to understand that this is a command regulation, okay? The government is making a decision here. They're setting a maximum price. It is not what we call a market-based intervention. You see, at the market level, there's two general types of interventions. There's command regulations. That's where the government's making a decision. They're either deciding generally, okay, the price that's going to prevail or the maximum price or minimum price that's going to prevail, or they're deciding the output, or they are telling the producers how to produce something. Market-based interventions like per unit taxes and per unit subsidies are called market-based interventions, are not called command regulations because they leave price completely flexible. There's no decision about price. Leave output completely flexible, no decisions about output, and they allow producers to decide how they're going to produce the good, okay? So again, market-based interventions, per unit taxes, per unit subsidies, this is a command regulation, a command on the market. And there's going to be some positives of this intervention, but there's also going to be some downsides. Let's get right to that right now, okay? Generally, we're doing a price ceiling, a price maximum to make something more affordable, but we also generally want it to be more available also. And the problem is with the price ceiling, we do help on the affordability, but it's going to hurt on the availability of the good. That's the big takeaway of a price ceiling. But we want to get into this analysis, okay? Now, in this video, we're trying to embrace as much complexity as possible. So I do want students to understand that oftentimes in the real world, price ceilings are going to be set at existing price equilibriums or price markets, and then they're going to become binding over time because, of course, over time, prices tend to go up, and so it becomes binding as prices begin to increase because it's set a maximum and it's not going anywhere, but the price equilibrium / price market will begin to go up over time. I mean, just in general, the currency of a country generally loses value across time, so of course that means prices are going up across time, so it becomes binding. Now, again, when we do a static two-dimensional model like this, that's what this is a static two-dimensional model. We just draw the price ceiling below price equilibrium because over time it certainly is going to be below the price equilibrium or price market. Okay, that's one of the complexities that we want to embrace in this video. Now, let's get to the impacts, okay? Now, according to this diagram, again, this model, we see that there is going to be a decrease in the quantity supplied. That movement right there, because the price is now lower, is what we call a decrease in the quantity supplied. But here's the situation in the real world. Oftentimes, we will see, even where there are price ceilings, supply increasing some amount. However, the big thing to understand is when that price ceiling is in place, we do maybe see supply actually increase, but there's a huge drag on supply. We don't get the increase in supply that we would have gotten if the price equilibrium or price market would have prevailed. That's the big takeaway. Again, this is a static two-dimensional model, so it can't show all of that, all right? It can't show, hey, maybe supply actually does increase across time. If you were to look at an apartment market like I have in this graph across time, maybe apartments are increasing, but the rate of increase is going to be slower where you have controls of the price of apartments, okay? So controls on the price of apartments than they would have if, again, that market price would have prevailed. So though this is not perfect, it certainly gives us insight. It shows us that drag on supply. Now, also, with the price ceiling, you get this increase in the quantity demanded, all right? And of course, a big takeaway of a price ceiling is the following result, that your quantity supplied is going to lag behind your quantity demanded, right? You've got that quantity demanded, quantity supplied. Again, quantity supplied, quantity demanded. And so you're going to get this shortage, okay? And we do see that in the real world. Where we put in price ceilings, there is this drag on supply, and it does increase this quantity demanded. And so you have markets that are suffering from shortages for long periods of time, okay? And this is not going to be relieved as time increases. In fact, as time increases, guys, our PES, price elasticity of supply, and PED, price elasticity of demand, they increase. And so as those elasticities increases, our shortages actually become bigger and bigger and bigger. See, that's one of the big things about a price control, is it doesn't create a whole lot of shortages at the very beginning oftentimes, but across time, the shortages get bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's a huge takeaway. And again, the reason for that is the increase in PED, the responsiveness of the demander to the price, and PES, the responsiveness of the supplier to price. Actually, one more thing about this drag on supply, okay? The fact that we're not going to get the supply we would have had. I like to say this to my students, okay? When you start making money for yourselves and you have enough money to invest, where are you going to invest that money? You have so many options, right? You have the stock market and all kinds of different stocks and different ETFs or mutual funds, index funds that you can invest in. You've got the bond market, all kinds of different bonds to invest in. You've got the real estate market, and you've got all kinds of different real estate to invest in. And the question is, are you going to direct your money to a city that has rent controls, okay? And I think the answer is, generally speaking, I'd be very hesitant giving all the different places that I can invest my money to go to a city that has rent controls. And that's what creates part of our drag on supply. All right, moving on. I want to get to this increase in the quantity demanded, okay? Because this is a really interesting point about price controls, is what you get here is this portion of the demand curve, this increase in the quantity demand curve, is called new entrants. And it's really important to understand that these dots are generally representing people who value the good less. Now, there's an ability to pay issue, so it's not perfect in what I just said there, but generally people that value it less. In other words, guys, here at Econ Busters, we love to say the following, that the demand curve is actually a bunch of dots. So I kind of want to just put a lot of dots on top of this curve, okay? The demand curve is actually a bunch of dots. And those dots sit above goods, okay? And the vertical distance between the good and the dot is the benefit somebody places on that good, all right? So behind all these dots are people, okay? And those people have different benefits they put on this good. And here's the deal. When you have that price ceiling in place, you get these new entrants. And I want to talk to you about who those new entrants are because they're on the lower portion of the demand curve. Now, before I go further, I do want you to understand, certainly some of these new entrants could be low-income families. And the reason I talk about low-income families is I think that's who we're targeting with our price ceiling, right? Low-income families, all right? So they could be low-income families, but what we have to understand is those are low-income families that did not have a dwelling before. And I think that's a big point, because I think generally speaking, that's not who we're targeting with a price ceiling. And not saying it wouldn't be good to get people that didn't have a dwelling to have a dwelling, but I don't think that's generally what we're focused on with that price ceiling. I think what we're focused on are families, oftentimes low income, who did have a dwelling. And if they had a dwelling before the price ceiling, that means they're represented by one of these dots. I think that's so important to understand. If they already had a dwelling prior to the implementation of the price ceiling, they're represented by one of these dots. And I think what we're trying to do with the price ceiling, generally speaking, is we're saying, look, here's the problem is rents are getting so high, they're putting tons of stress on the family. A good way to think about it is we might want a rent to be about 33% of a family's income, okay, somewhere in there. But hey, look at, how about when rents become 50%, 55, 60, 65, 70% of a family's income? Incredible stress on that family, and we want to do something about that stress. And we have very good intentions in wanting to do things about that stress. But again, oftentimes I think who we're targeting is the families that have a dwelling, but they have so much stress because the rent is so high, okay? Now, on these new entrants, maybe, again, there will be a few families that did not have a dwelling at all that are now going to be able to get a dwelling, and that would be fantastic. But I want you to think about some other new entrants that will be coming into the marketplace, okay? They will be things like roommates, all right? So where neither person had their own dwelling, right? And so the roommates, or maybe it might be 2 or 3 or 4 roommates, whatever, they are now deciding, hey, I'm gonna now go look for an apartment of my own, okay? So adult roommates. Or it could be adult children that are living with their parents, and the adult child says, hey, now I can afford my dwelling of my own, and so they become a new entrant. They start actively seeking an apartment. Or it could even be college students who are living in the dorm, but don't want to live in the dorm, so they want an apartment. And again, that's what's generally happening with these new entrants. Again, people that did not have a dwelling of their own, now beginning to actively seek a dwelling. And here is a big issue, is since this is the quantity supplied, and I'm going to draw that straight up my diagram, okay? I like to say it kind of creates a wall. This is all that's going to be supplied. And if this is what's being demanded, people are actively seeking an apartment right here, that means every person that lies behind every single one of these dots is now looking for an apartment. However, this is all that is available out there. And what that leads us to is we're going to have problems of being distributively inefficient. Now, let's define distributive efficient. What's distributively efficient? It means that we have distributed the goods to those who value them the most. That's right. To be distributively efficient, it means that the goods have been distributed to those who value them the most. But here's the thing. The price is no longer fully rationing the good. Certainly price has rationed some people out of the market, okay? People that sit behind the dots that are on this portion of the demand curve, they're still not actively seeking. But we have all these people actively seeking, and price is not rationing the good for those people anymore. Why are they not? Why is it not? Because this is all there is that is supplied, okay? And since that's all there is that is supplied, price is not deciding who's going to get it and who is not. And again, that leads to those new entrants, which leads to the following result. Some of the people that sit behind these dots are going to end up getting the apartment. So let's just talk about, say, this dot right here. Perhaps if I make it bigger, we can kind of see it there in the video. And this vertical distance would be their consumer surplus from getting the apartment. So what that means is we're going to draw right down to here. This distance would be the benefit of the apartment. This distance would be the price of the apartment, so the cost to them of the apartment. So the benefits exceed the cost by that amount right there, which we call the consumer surplus. Now, if somebody or the person that sits behind this dot or is represented by this dot on our graph gets it, that means somebody represented by one of these dots is not going to get it. So I'm going to draw some verticals. It's going to take a second. I'll keep the same marker. So these verticals would be the consumer surplus that people would get if these were the people that got it. If the people that were represented by these dots end up getting the apartment, they would get these verticals, right? These consumer surpluses. Now, I'm going a little bit slow, so see if I can pick up my pace just a little bit. So there we go. And it's kind of good to see this area right there, because that's generally in a class what the teacher is going to be looking for. Let me fill that demand curve back in. They're going to be looking for you to say, oh, this is now the consumer surplus. But what I want students to know is there's a better name than just saying this is the consumer surplus. I think a student should say that's the maximum consumer surplus, and we're not going to get the maximum. Again, here's the thing, guys. Some of the people that are behind these dots are going to get the good. And again, we're saying this person gets the good. If they get the good, one of these people don't. And so what I do is I have to erase a large part of the consumer surplus. So I take that dot right on over. So this is what's left, right? All that consumer surplus goes away, and we only get that consumer surplus right there, because again, one of those new entrants might have gotten it. And if the person that is behind, say, this dot right here ends up getting it, well, I've got to get rid of another or a large part of the vertical associated with, say, that dot. They don't end up getting it. And so what you see are these big losses in consumer surplus, because remember, all the number of people that are going to get the good is right here, but because price is not rationing the good, we are not for sure that these are the people who are going to get the good. In fact, I'm saying that they are not all going to get the good. Some of these people are, because what's going to ration the good now? It's going to be things like wait times, networks, that's right, just who you know, proximity to it, okay? Just how close you are to where there becomes availability of the good, all right? Just knowledge in general, who has the knowledge. There's just going to be a lot of things that end up rationing the good, because price is no longer rationing good, and therefore we're not going to be distributively efficient. The people who value it the most are not going to get the good, and always there's a big asterisk on that. I mean, certainly this is not just willingness, but ability. But again, a lot of the families that we're trying to help had an apartment, okay, but over time, are they going to be able to maintain an apartment now that all these new entrants, and all these people are still in the market too, okay? And yet that's all there is being supplied, one of the big issues. So again, this is a command regulation. The government has made a decision that this is going to be the price maximum. We are doing what's called a price control. We're controlling the price. When we do that, we have to understand the realities of doing that. And one of the realities is when you do this, you're sending a signal that, hey, society doesn't value it as much. And so you're not going to get the supply that you would have gotten. So I think what we want to do oftentimes with needs is, yes, make them more affordable, but also more available. Is there anything the government could do to make it more affordable and available? And the answer is yes. They could do a market-based intervention. What market-based intervention? A per unit subsidy. That's right. If they grant per unit subsidies, guys, the price consumer, the actual amount the consumer has to pay out of their own pocket is going to go down. It will become more affordable. And at the same time, the price the producer receives, which is the price the consumer pays plus the government subsidy, their PP, what's called price producer, is going to go up. And when that happens, that's going to attract more supply. So we're going to have more availability. In fact, a subsidy is not going to leave us with the result that price equilibrium, price market would have given us, where the quantity supplied equaled the quantity demanded right here, right? The quantity supplied equaled the quantity demanded right here. A per unit subsidy is actually going to extend out both the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded. It's going to become more available than the market left alone, and definitely much more available than a price ceiling. Again, a price ceiling is a command regulation. It's a command upon the market. It's a decision of the market, and it's controlling prices. And prices coordinate economic activity. And we have to be very careful when we do that, okay? Now, before I end this video, I do want you to understand that there are some economists that support all kinds of price ceilings. But I do want you to understand that the number of economists that support price ceilings increases, or the support around price ceilings increases as the suppliers get more concentrated market power. That's right. Let's take something like a pharmaceutical good where we've granted a patent. When we've granted a patent, we've given full market power to a single producer. In those situations, I think economists are much more open to discussions about price ceilings. Again, not every economist definitely would want a price ceiling. Even in this case, no doubt about it, there'd still be disagreement, but you'd see the number of economists that support the price ceiling would increase as the market power becomes concentrated on the supply side. But if we have adequate competition, we need to be very careful by putting in a price ceiling, a command regulation on the market. I hope that made sense to you. We'll see you in the next video.